Hannah Schneider was traveling on the train to Munich, feeling a serene joy, the kind that blooms when you are about to fulfill someone else's dream. To the other passengers, she was just a woman in her early 40s, dressed in a comfortable wool coat and simple pants, her hair tied in an unpretentious bun. No one would guess that this figure, with a paperback in hand and a discreet smile on her lips, was the architect of one of the largest charitable foundations in Europe, a woman whose silent fortune was as vast as her aversion to ostentation. She lived by a simple philosophy. The value of a life lay not in what one accumulated, but in what one shared. And today she was about to share a piece of pure happiness. The destination was a luxury car dealership, a place Anna would normally avoid. But the gift was not for her. It was for Clara, her younger sister, an artist who saw beauty in everything except material possessions. However, since childhood, Clara had harbored a platonic love for a specific type of car, a purely aesthetic admiration for its curves and the promise of freedom. And Anna had discovered that a limited edition, in a shade Clara herself would describe as midnight blue, was on display in Munich. The sparkle in Anna's eyes intensified just imagining the shock and joy on her sister's face. It wasn't about the price. It never was. It was about the gesture, about turning a childhood fantasy into a tangible reality. As she got off at the station, the air in Munich felt more electric, charged with purpose. Anna walked through the elegant streets, passing shop windows displaying jewelry and watches that cost more than houses, feeling like an observer in a world that was not hers. Finally, she spotted her destination. The dealership was less of a building and more of a sculpture, a temple of glass and polished steel that rose majestically at the corner, housing within it gleaming machines that seemed like dormant predators. Each car, perfectly lit, was a promise of status and power. To Anna, it was a cold universe, but inside that luxury aquarium was her sister's blue dream. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk, feeling the contrast between her inner world, full of affection and purpose, and the outside world of that store, which seemed to judge every passerby by their monetary value. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her coat not out of vanity, but as one prepares for a mission. With Clara's face in her mind, she walked with firm steps and pushed open the heavy glass door, feeling the cold air conditioning and the imposing silence of the place envelop her completely. Silence was the first thing that hit her, a thick, expensive silence that absorbed the sound of the city and replaced it with the smell of new leather and polish. The air was cold and sterile, and the surgical lights hanging from the towering ceiling made each car shine like an untouchable jewel. At the center of that pantheon of metal and glass was Klaus Bergmann. He didn't sell cars, he healed a gallery of trophies for the victors of life. From his position, he watched the entrance, his trained gaze able to identify in seconds the weight of a wallet by the cut of a suit or the gleam of a watch. His thoughts were a constant calculation of time versus commission. When his eyes landed on Anna, his brain registered a series of negatives. The wool coat, practical but unbranded. The shoes, comfortable for walking, not for strutting. The bag made of simple leather, lacking the monogram that screamed purchasing power. In less than 3 seconds, the verdict was formed. Curious. A lost soul, perhaps seeking shelter from the rain that threatened to fall, or simply someone wanting to daydream for a few minutes before being gently invited to leave. A wave of annoyance coursed through Bergmann. Time wasted. He moved, not with the eager haste he reserved for qualified clients, but with a deliberate calm like a museum guard approaching someone who had gotten too close to a masterpiece. "Good morning," he said, his voice a veneer of politeness over a wood of impatience. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes, which remained cold and analytical. "Can I help you?" Before Anna could respond, before she could even mention the midnight blue coupe that had brought her there, he interrupted her with a paternalistic hand gesture. "I understand. The main showroom can be a bit intimidating. There are many options." Anna's initial confusion, the joy of her mission, began to dissipate, replaced by a chill that did not come from the air conditioning. She felt the weight of his gaze, a gaze that did not see her, only measured and dismissed her. With a cruel subtlety, Bergmann began to guide her, not with words but with his posture, moving away from the limited edition models and walking toward a dimly lit area in the back. With each step he took, she felt diminished. Anna's heart, which had once beat with the excitement of the present, now thudded with the painful realization of that prejudgment. When they reached a modest selection of used vehicles, Bergmann stopped and turned to her, his filtering task complete. He opened his arms in a gesture that feigned generosity, but was in fact an act of confinement. You will surely find something more suitable around here. Feel free." And with that, he turned his back to her, leaving her alone, the echo of the word suitable lingering in the air like a silent insult. For a long moment, Anna stood still, the smell of old cars and cheap polish filling the air around her. The initial humiliation, sharp and cold, gave way to an ember of determination. She was not a leaf in the wind to be blown to forgotten corners. That presence meant something, and so did her dignity. Straightening her shoulders, she turned and walked back to the dazzling glow of the main hall, her steps now silent but firm. She found Klaus Bergmann admiring his own reflection on the hood of a red convertible. He turned as he heard her approach, and the irritation on his face was unmistakable. "Yes?" he asked, his tone as dry as dust. Anna looked him straight in the eye, her voice calm yet unwavering. "I believe there has been a mistake. I am not interested in the used vehicles. I specifically came to see the new limited edition coupe, the Midnight Blue." Bergman let out a sigh, a theatrical sound of exhaustion, as if he were dealing with the most stubborn of children. The incredulity in his mind was genuine. How dared this simple woman insist? He decided to end the matter once and for all. "Madam," he said, dragging the word with condescension, "as I should have explained better, that is a car for collectors. To avoid wear, we only show it to clients with a purchase history, and of course, by appointment. It's a standard procedure to protect the asset." The lie slipped out as smooth and polished as the cars around them. The exact moment the word asset left his lips, the doorbell rang, and a couple entered noisily. He with a gold watch that captured light from every angle, she enveloped in an expensive perfume and loud laughter. Bergmann's transformation was instantaneous and frightening. The scowl of boredom melted into a wide, servile smile. His posture, once rigid and defensive, became open and inviting. "Dr. Schmidt, what a wonderful surprise," he exclaimed, gliding towards them and completely ignoring Anna's presence. "We heard you have a new crown jewel here, Klaus," said the man. "The blue coupe," Bergmann laughed as if they had shared the best of jokes. "You have a nose for exclusivity. Please follow me. You will be the first to see it today." From where she stood, paralyzed, Anna watched the scene with painful clarity. Bergmann led them to a platform covered with a black silk cloth, the same car that moments ago required an appointment. With a theatrical flourish, he pulled back the fabric, revealing the coupe. The midnight blue paint shimmered under the lights, deep and magnificent, just as she had imagined. The hypocrisy was so blatant it bordered on surreal. She became invisible, an unwanted spectator in the theater of flattery. After a few minutes, Bergmann noticed she was still there, watching. The smile on his face vanished like a light going out. He excused himself from the couple and marched over to Anna, his face a mask of contained fury. He leaned in, his voice a low, sharp hiss. "Was I not clear enough? I am busy with serious clients. You have already wasted my time and yours. Please leave." Bergmann's words, spoken like a final verdict, hung in the air for a moment. Behind him, Anna could hear the laughter of the wealthy couple, a sound that seemed to mock her very existence in that space. The pain of humiliation was sharp, a physical stab in her chest. But just beneath the pain lay a foundation of steel, built by a lifetime of discretion and inner strength. That man had not insulted her. He had insulted the basic principles of respect and dignity. Sadness morphed into a cold, clear understanding. She would not leave there as a victim. With a calm that violently contrasted with the storm in her chest, Anna turned, ignoring the blue coupe and its arrogant guardian, and walked straight to the main reception. The young woman behind the marble counter, who had witnessed everything, offered her a nervous smile. "I wish to speak with the owner, Mr. Richard Meyer," Anna said, her voice devoid of tremor. The receptionist hesitated, protocol battling against the scene she had just witnessed. "Mr. Meyer is in a meeting. Perhaps Mr. Bergmann, our manager, could—" Anna interrupted her, not rudely, but with unwavering firmness. "It is precisely about Mr. Bergmann's behavior that I need to speak. I can wait." She did not sit. She simply stood, her silent and expectant presence becoming louder than any shout. The receptionist, visibly uncomfortable under that calm gaze, picked up the phone. Richard Meyer's office was like him, expensive, polished, and isolated from the outside world. He greeted her with professional politeness, but his eyes revealed a man who saw his time as his most valuable asset. He listened to Anna's story, told without emotion, like a report of facts. She described the disdain, the lie about the scheduled time, and the blatant hypocrisy that followed. Meyer listened, his fingers lightly tapping on his mahogany desk. In his mind, a scale was forming. On one side, the account of this unknown woman. On the other, Klaus Bergmann, his most relentless and profitable salesman, the man who broke sales targets every quarter. The decision for a pragmatist like Meyer was simple. He would trust his star employee. When Anna finished, he clasped his hands, his face a mask of rehearsed concern. "Ma'am, I deeply regret your experience. This does not reflect our standards. I assure you that I will look into the matter and have a serious conversation with Mr. Bergman." The words were a corporate balm, designed to soothe and dismiss. Anna instantly perceived the lack of weight behind them. She nodded slowly. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Meyer." She got up and left the office, crossing the silent showroom and pushing the glass door to the outside world. The grey air of Munich filled her lungs. She did not feel defeated. She felt like someone who had just lit a fuse. There was no certainty about what would happen when the flame reached the end, but she knew with a deep certainty that the silence of that morning was about to be shattered by a thunderclap. The next morning was born with the same arrogance as the day before. Inside the dealership, sunlight created long, bright stripes on the marble floor, and Klaus Bergmann was in his element. He moved around the showroom, a general inspecting his troops, offering advice to a younger salesman. Richard Meyer had given him a gentle warning the day before, a formality that Bergmann dismissed as a mosquito buzz. "You have to filter, my dear," he told his colleague with a smile of superiority. "Our time is our most precious asset. We cannot waste it on dreamers and tourists." He felt invincible, the king in his glass castle. It was then that a shadow fell over the entrance. It was not a passing cloud. It was a car, a black and silent fortress that glided up to the front of the store with the absence of sound of a predator. A Maybach. It was not just a vehicle. It was a statement of power, so absolute that it seemed to absorb the very light around it. Conversations in the showroom died down. The junior salesman swallowed hard. Bergmann himself felt an involuntary shiver, a primal instinct that recognized a power of a higher order. The driver's door did not open. Instead, a man in a pristine uniform emerged from the passenger side, walked with silent efficiency, and opened the rear door, creating a small ritual of deference that captured everyone's attention. From the interior of the car, Markus Schneider emerged. He was not tall or imposing in an obvious way. His authority did not come from volume, but from density. He wore a perfectly tailored suit of charcoal grey that did not scream for attention, but commanded it. His leather shoes gleamed with a discreet shine, and his gaze was calm, analytical and heavy. He entered the dealership, and the silence, which had been merely an absence of sound, became a palpable and tense presence. Richard Meyer, sensing the abrupt change in the atmosphere of his fiefdom, stepped out of his office, his face a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Markus did not rush. His eyes swept the showroom, passing by the multi-million-dollar cars as if they were mere obstacles. His gaze passed over the receptionist, the junior salesman, and finally landed with the precision of a laser on Klaus Bergmann, who was now beside his boss, Richard Meyer. The two men, the salesman and the owner, suddenly seemed smaller, less significant. Markus stopped at a respectful yet dominant distance, allowing the silence to stretch for one moment longer, forcing them to feel the full weight of that moment. Then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the air and echoed in the heart of everyone present, clear, calm, and laden with an impending storm. "Good morning. I believe you met my wife Anna yesterday." The following morning was born with the same arrogance as the day before, bathing the dealership's showroom in a cold, presumptuous light. At the center of his universe of chrome and glass, Klaus Bergmann was instructing a junior salesman, a young man named Leo, whose eyes still held a glimmer of idealism that Bergmann was intent on extinguishing. "The secret, Leo, is not to sell to everyone. It's to sell to the right people," he pontificated, gesturing to a gleaming convertible. "We are the guardians of the brand, protectors of a dream, and dreams come with a price. We cannot allow our showroom to become a tourist attraction." Richard Meyer's reprimand the previous afternoon had been so mild, so devoid of conviction, that it only inflated Bergmann's ego. He felt justified. "Just yesterday, we had a classic example," he continued, a sneer on his lips. "A lady, pleasant enough, but completely out of her element. If you give in to one, you open the door for all. You have to be firm." Leo nodded, but a discomfort settled in his stomach. There was something about his manager's casual cruelty that disgusted him. What Bergmann did not know was that the previous night had been long at the Schneider residence. Anna came home not with anger, but with a layer of silent sadness that Markus, her husband, knew all too well. It was the disappointment with the meanness of the world, a wound that money could not heal. In response to his concerned question, she recounted the day's events matter-of-factly, without tears or drama, as if describing a scene from a book. But Marcus saw beyond the facts. He saw the subtle humiliation, his wife's dignity being trampled by a banal and hateful prejudice. As Anna spoke, Marcus's hand, resting on the table, slowly closed into a tight fist. His face, usually warm and open, became a mask of cold, concentrated fury. He said nothing that night, only comforted her, but the decision had already been made. It would not be an explosion of rage, but a lesson about the true meaning of power and worth, and it would be delivered personally. And now the lesson was arriving. It came in the form of a polished black monolith that glided down the street and stopped in front of the dealership with a supernatural silence. A Maybach. Its paint was so deep that it seemed to swallow the light, its presence so imposing that the other cars on the street looked like mere toys. Pedestrians stopped to look, not at a car, but at a phenomenon. From the passenger seat, a man in immaculate uniform, Heinrich, emerged with robotic efficiency. He circled the vehicle and opened the rear door with a gesture that was both an act of service and a display of power. From this dark portal, Marcus Schneider appeared. He paused for a moment on the sidewalk, and through his eyes, the narrator could see what he saw. Not a luxury store, but a stage. He saw the arrogance in Bergman's posture, the nervousness in the younger salesman, the calculated opulence to intimidate and select, and he felt a wave of cold contempt. As he entered, the sound of his leather shoes on the marble was the only sound in the suddenly silent hall. Each step was deliberate, rhythmic, a drum marching toward the center of power of that small kingdom. Richard Meyer, alerted by his business instincts, sniffing a colossal opportunity, hurried out of his office, his face shaped into a welcoming smile. He and Bergman stood together, a united front of commercial hospitality. Marcus walked until he stopped a few meters from them. He did not speak immediately. First, his gaze swept the environment, lingering for a fraction of a second on the midnight blue coupe still on display. Then, his gaze turned back to the two men. He adjusted the cuff of his shirt, a minimal gesture, but it stretched the silence to a breaking point. Bergman and Meyer felt beads of sweat forming on their foreheads. That man was not there to buy. He was there to collect. Finally, after an eternity contained in seconds, Marcus Schneider fixed his gaze directly on Klaus Bergman, and his voice, calm, clear, and as heavy as a tombstone, echoed through the hall. "Good morning. I believe you met my wife Anna yesterday." Marcus Schneider's statement fell into the silence of the hall like a stone into a frozen lake, shattering the surface of normality and revealing the dark depths below. Klaus Bergman's face went through an agonizing succession of transformations. First confusion, then a flash of denial as his brain refused to connect the powerful figure before him with the insignificant woman he had dismissed with such disdain the day before. Finally, when the connection solidified, blood drained from his face, leaving behind a pale mask of pure and absolute terror. He opened his mouth, but only a choked sound escaped. "Your wife?" Richard Meyer, on the other hand, reacted with the speed of a predator sensing the smell of blood. His own. His sharp and calculating business mind raced. The woman's complaint, the arrival of this man, the Maybach outside, the pieces fell into place with catastrophic clarity. A knot of panic and fury formed in his stomach. He cast a glance at Bergman, a look that contained a promise of annihilation. "Yes," Marcus continued, his voice maintaining a dangerously calm tone, which made it even more threatening. "Anna Schneider. She told me about the visit. She recounted how she was judged, measured, and deemed unfit to breathe the same air as your new cars." He took a step forward, and the world seemed to shrink around the three men. "You see, Mr. Bergman, you made a fundamental misjudgment. You are an expert in assessing a customer's credit, but you failed to assess the value of a human being. You looked at my wife and saw simple clothes. Let me tell you what you didn't see." Marcus paused, allowing the weight of his next words to accumulate. "You didn't see the founder and the driving force behind the Schneider Foundation for Childhood, a woman who, for the past 10 years, has tirelessly worked to raise over 50 million euros to build and maintain state-of-the-art facilities for children with severe disabilities. You didn't see the woman who spends her nights reading therapy proposals and her weekends holding the hands of children that society prefers to forget. The woman you dismissed to the use section is the same woman whose name is on the plaques of hospitals and rehabilitation centers." A collective gasp seemed to sweep through the hall. Young Leo looked at Bergman with a mix of horror and fascination. Maya felt a wave of nausea. This was no longer about a lost sale. It was a public relations disaster waiting to happen. "Mr. Schneider," he intervened, his voice trembling, desperately trying to regain control. "This is inexcusable. Her grotesque mistake. On behalf of the entire dealership, I offer my deepest and sincerest apologies. Actions will be taken, I assure you." Marcus raised a hand, and Maya's flow of words ceased instantly. "Actions? Oh, undoubtedly. But first, let me conclude the damage assessment." His eyes, cold as steel, returned to Bergman, who seemed to have aged a decade in a matter of minutes. "Anna didn't come here yesterday just to buy a gift for her sister. That was a test. You see, we are in the process of renewing the entire executive fleet of my company. 7 sedans of the most expensive model you have. Furthermore, our private collection needs an upgrade. The Midnight Blue Coupe would be the first of many. We were prepared to close a multi-million-euro deal, but Anna, in her wisdom, insists that we only do business with partners who demonstrate integrity and character. She came personally and anonymously to feel the soul of this place." The silence that followed was the sound of millions of euros turning to smoke. Maya felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. He could visualize the sales graphs plummeting, the annual bonuses evaporating, the difficult conversations with headquarters in Germany. All his fury was now concentrated on a single point: the trembling man beside him, his star salesman, who with a single display of arrogance had sunk the ship. Marcus delivered the final blow. "My wife wanted to give you our business. In return, you showed her your disdain. She was not treated as a customer, but as a contamination. So yes, Mr. Meyer, actions will be taken, but they will be ours." He looked at Bergman one last time, his face devoid of any emotion except for a cold disdain. "Congratulations on your judgment, Mr. Bergman. You looked at one of the most valuable souls I've ever known and saw nothing. Your commission on that nothing is precisely 0. With that, Marcus Schneider turned, his straight back a final display of power, and walked out of the dealership, leaving behind a deep silence, broken only by the sound of a man's ragged breathing who had just realized he had destroyed his own world. Marcus Schneider's departure left a void that was quickly filled by a frozen fury. In the deafening silence of the showroom, Richard Meyer grabbed Bergman's arm with a force that made him shudder and dragged him to his office. The door closed with a click that sounded like a sentence. There were no shouts. Shouting would have been a mercy. Instead, Meyer's voice was a venomous whisper, each word a stab. "You didn't just lose a sale, you fool," he hissed, his face inches from Bergman's. "You spat in the face of one of the most influential and respected families in the country. You turned my dealership, the work of my life, into a symbol of prejudice and arrogance. You have no idea what you've done." Bergman, pale and trembling, couldn't articulate a single word of defense. The call from Marcus Schneider's office came 2 hours later. It was not a resignation request for Bergman. What the Schneiders wanted was more complex, and, for Bergman, infinitely worse. It was a form of poetic justice. The conditions were clear and non-negotiable. First, Klaus Bergman was to work as a volunteer and in a service role at the next gala event of the Schneider Foundation. He would not be a guest, he would be the help. Second, the Meyer dealership was to hire at its own expense a specialized consultancy to implement a mandatory and comprehensive training program on unconscious bias for the entire staff, from reception to management. Meyer, cornered and seeing this as his only tenuous chance to save his reputation, accepted everything. For Bergman, it was not a choice. It was his penance. A month passed. A month in which Bergman lived under the disdainful gaze of his colleagues and the icy silence of his boss. Then, the night of the gala arrived. The banquet hall bore no resemblance to the cold, sterile temple he knew. The environment was bathed in a warm golden light, filled with genuine laughter, soft music from a string quartet, and a current of palpable emotion. Instead of cars on pedestals, there were large panels with smiling photos of children. Instead of the smell of wax and leather, there was the fragrance of fresh flowers and good food. Bergman, uncomfortable in his suit now covered by a simple black apron, felt like a ghost. His task was to keep the champagne glasses full and remove the empty plates. From his post of servitude he watched. He saw Anna Schneider, the woman he had deemed unworthy, moving through the hall. She did not walk with the arrogance of the wealthy he so often fawned over. She floated with genuine grace, embracing grateful parents, kneeling to speak with children, her smile a source of light. He saw Marcus by her side, not as an armored avenger, but as a proud husband, whose gaze at his wife was one of deep admiration. Screens displayed short videos, a girl in a wheelchair learning to paint with her hands, a boy taking his first steps with the help of state-of-the-art prosthetic legs, all direct beneficiaries of the foundation. For the first time in his life, Bergman was forced to confront the true meaning of worth. His metric for success, based on commissions and bonuses, suddenly seemed pathetic, an empty illusion. The shame he felt was a slow and deep burn, purifying in its agony. At the end of the night, after Anna's moving speech, Bergman saw an opportunity. She was standing near a balcony for a moment alone, gazing at the city lights. With his heart pounding against his ribs, he approached, not as the confident sales manager, but as a penitent pilgrim. "Mrs. Schneider," he said, his voice hoarse. Anna turned, and on her face was no trace of triumph or disdain, just a calm curiosity. He took a deep breath. I need to apologize. What I did that day was unforgivable. I didn't see a client, I didn't see a person. I saw a set of clothes and made a disgusting judgment, coming from the worst place in my soul. I was blind," his voice faltered, "blind with arrogance and a completely distorted idea of what it means to have worth. Tonight I saw what true worth is, and I am sorry. From the bottom of my heart, I am sorry." The tears he could not contain were not of self-pity, but of raw and painful sincerity. Anna listened to him in silence, her gaze never wavering, and when he finished, a faint smile touched her lips. Anna Schneider listened, her serene face bathed in the soft light of the balcony. When Bergman's tears ceased, leaving only the rawness of his confession in the air, she offered him a smile that contained no pity, but a deep and serene understanding. "Redemption is not in my words, Mr. Bergman," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "It has already happened within you. The hardest forgiveness, and the only one that truly matters, is the one we grant ourselves when we finally understand the mistake. The most valuable lesson is not the one that humiliates us, but the one that transforms us." Her words were not an absolution, but a recognition of the painful journey he had taken that night. For Bergman, it was as if a door had opened in a room he thought was locked forever. At that exact moment, Marcus Schneider approached, having observed the scene from a distance. There was a silent understanding between him and his wife. He saw on her face that Bergman's sincerity was genuine. Richard Meyer, who had been hovering nervously a few meters away, also moved closer, his face a mask of anxiety, desperate to know the final verdict. Marcus first addressed Meyer, his tone now purely professional. "Mr. Meyer, after careful reconsideration and based on certain demonstrations of cultural change, we have decided to proceed with the acquisition of the fleet for our company." A nearly audible sigh of relief escaped Meyer. His shoulders, which had been tense for a month, visibly relaxed. He opened his mouth to utter a cascade of thanks, but Marcus raised his hand to stop him, his gaze shifting from Meyer to a completely stunned Klaus Bergman. "However," Marcus continued, "we have a final condition, a non-negotiable condition." The tension returned to the air, thicker than ever. Bergman stiffened, bracing for a final blow, a last clause of humiliation. Marcus looked directly into Bergman's eyes, and what followed was the deepest shock of all. "We want Mr. Bergman, and only him, to personally oversee the entire transaction, from the customization of each vehicle to the final delivery." The silence that followed was absolute. Meyer looked from Marcus to Bergman, as if he had heard a foreign language. Bergman himself was speechless, his mind unable to process the magnitude of those words. Trust, responsibility, a second chance on a scale he could never have conceived in his wildest dreams. He looked at Marcus, searching for a sign of mockery, but found only unwavering seriousness. Marcus explained, his voice addressing everyone, but his message was for Bergman. "We do not believe in destroying a man, but in rebuilding him. Mr. Bergman demonstrated tonight that he has learned the crucial difference between the price of an object and the value of a person. We believe that the man who now understands that value is the only one qualified to handle a business of this importance to us. Consider this your final test. Trust is not given, it is earned. This is your opportunity to earn it." Tears welled up in Bergman's eyes again, but this time they were not of shame, but of a gratitude so overwhelming that it left him breathless. He could not speak. He simply nodded vigorously, a gesture that contained the promise of a reborn man. Meyer, in turn, was forced to witness something that his cynical business world rarely allowed. Redemption was not just a poetic idea, but a powerful tool for transformation, capable of producing results that no threat or punishment could achieve. With one last nod to Bergman, Marcus wrapped his arm around Anna's waist. "Don't disappoint us," he said simply. Together, the couple turned and walked away, leaving behind the two men from the dealership, a boss who had just received a lesson in management and humanity, and an employee who had received something infinitely more precious than $1 million commission. Klaus Bergman stood there under the golden lights of the gala, no longer as the arrogant king of a glass castle, nor as the humiliated servant in a ballroom. He was just a man, stripped of his old skin, receiving the rare and wonderful opportunity to rebuild himself anew, this time on a foundation of respect, integrity, and the hard lesson that the greatest value one can recognize is often invisible, residing in the heart of another.